And here we go. So today we are going to be continuing our talk of the social impact of computer science. And we're going to be talking about a fairly sensitive issue today, which is the topic of racism and how racism and computer science intersect. It's not always doesn't always intersect, and it's not always racism either. People can in fact be jerks to each other in a lot of different ways. Like we'll read about what's happening in Tampa right now, in Florida, which is not race-based, but is still horrifying. All right, and there you go. Here's a live link on YouTube. All right, so there's three main definitions of racism out there. The first one is kind of the more fundamental, kind of low-level definition of racism, which is just the notion that one race is better than another, right? And my people are better than your people. That's sort of the underlying root of a lot of racism. And you can measure this indirectly. Usually, if you ask people, do you believe that one race is superior to another? They typically say no. But if you look at that group doesn't succeed because they're lazy, then that's sort of, right, saying their group is worse than ours. So that's kind of one of the ways of expressing racism. Second way, which is the most common definition of racism with right-wing people, is individual acts of prejudice, ignorance also, I would say, and discrimination. Right. So if you make a claim like all X do Y and it's just completely off base, that'd be like a statement out of ignorance. That oftentimes will be called racist. The more common thing would be like, don't hire that person. They're Chinese. We don't hire Chinese people here. That, especially to Republicans, that's what racism means. Fire that person. I don't like their skin color. Would be racist. And to left-wing people, though, oftentimes the third definition is the one most commonly used these days. Although, to be fair, all three terms kind of they overlap, and we've talked about fighting over definitions. People fight over these definitions tooth and nail, because to be a racist in American society can get you fired, right? Like if you, accuse somebody of racism, that's grounds for dismissal, right? And and so there's some people that believe that just participating in a system that results in disparate outcomes makes you a racist, right? Like if you go to Fresno State, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you go to Fresno State, and Fresno State has different achievement levels for the different races of humanity. Although again, the very concept of different races is self-problematic. Then you're a racist because you are participating in a system that has different outcomes for people of different races. And so, and then now that you're a racist, you can be fired. And so it's there's a lot of so people will fight over those definitions because if just living makes you a racist and being a racist can get you fired, that's serious business. That definition is serious business. And so less extreme than that would simply be let's say that your school admits people using an online application form, and people of different races have different access to online applications. Then even though the system is in theory open to everybody, it's going to have disparate impact, right? And so the more moderate version of, I think, bullet point 3 is actually quite fair, right? We're doing a lot of online learning right now, and if you're going to require people to have a computer and to have a high-speed internet connection to do Zoom, most classes are on Zoom, not on Discord and YouTube, where you can watch them at your leisure. Then you're going to have a disproportionate impact on people that are low income, right? And there is a correlation between a low income and different races as well. And so thinking about it, I think is probably a good idea, right? Like if you're going to mandate that, what is it, unemployment benefits be done online, and housing applications, like if you become homeless, right? If you become homeless and you apply for emergency housing, you have to do that online. Well, how the hell are you going to do that if you, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so that would be a system that is like, we would say unfair, right? Or there's different words you can use for it. Basically, like I do think at a certain level, it's a good idea to take a look at how your systems are set up, and if you're going to require people to have a house to apply for emergency housing, like that's a problem, and then so the solution, of course, is you have to go to a public library and then apply there, which is why we have libraries, right? But libraries are not evenly distributed as well, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways you can look at these things, and I think some of the more extreme versions of bullet point 3 are a little bit too extreme for me, where like, just by living you're a racist. Like, it's like, nah, it's not. I'm not really into that, but if you look at how systems, and really there's a lot of areas where you could be like, yeah, the systems we have set up are not well designed, and people, I think, of right and left wings and middle wings, as well, a three-winged chicken, I don't know, can be like, yeah, that's probably not a good idea to do whatever, so, and also what's interesting is that, like, if you look at like Robin DiAngelo, who wrote White Fragility, not one of my favorite books, by the way. It's interesting, but she states that she's not interested in individual acts of prejudice and discrimination, right? And I'm like, really? Because like I am like, if somebody's like I had a student in my class one time, call Hispanic students wetbacks, and I was like, out, like, get out of here, dude. What the hell are you doing? To me, like, that's a big deal. Like, what, you just don't care about that because all you care about are systems? You don't care about like individual, acts of prejudice? Like, really? Not at all? Like, so I think that there's good reasons to care about all three of the definitions. And again, I'm not the kind of person that believes that he's smart enough to know which one's right, or even if you can say just one of them's right, because you kind of have to look at it from different angles, as well. So yeah, it's like, really, so you just let that slide, because like all you care about are systems and equal outcomes for people, right? And if all you care about are equal outcomes, does that mean like, there's more people from the Dominican Republic that play Major League Baseball proportional to their income? Is that discrimination? Is right? Like, are they being discriminated for because, or is there like a cultural element to baseball? You know what I mean? Like, are you gonna blame everything on racism, or is it just like sometimes there are cultural elements that result in like some groups being more interested in baseball, right? So I don't know. I am not going to enforce any of these definitions on you guys. I'm just presenting them so that you guys can see kind of the different views on what it means to be racist. Okay, and they also overlap, right? So like Yale Medical School, which had a racist, and I don't care if you're right wing, middle wing, or left wing, it was racist against all sorts of people, right? They had the Jewish quota until the 60s. Like not that long ago, where they're like, yeah, don't take more than 5 Jews, right? And Yale as a college overall imposed a quota on the number of Jews because Jews were doing too well. Too many Jews were getting in, according to the Yale people. They're ruining the campus, and so they imposed a racial quota on Jews, and that existed through the 60s, right? Not that long ago, and take only 2 Italian Catholics and take no blacks at all, right? So all sorts of discrimination, like it's not just equal. I wouldn't say they're equal opportunity discriminators because they said no blacks versus 5 Jews out of, I think it was like 500 students, But yeah, there's all sorts of discrimination to go around. You know, it's like, you know, sometimes people say, you know, you can't be racist against white people. It's like, you know, Italians, Jews, depends on your definition of whiteness, right? Because they didn't used to be, like, Italians didn't used to be considered white. Jews didn't used to be considered white, but by the 50s, you know, they were, you know. And if you know, you want to talk about discrimination by ethnicity, there's the expulsion of the Arcadians. And so you know, hey, is your last name, you know, French? Guess what? 14,000 of you, out of the 14,000 Acadians in the region, 11,000 were evicted from their homes, right? And so, you know, forced removal by the British of people of French descent, right? Like, it does happen, you know, it's not like, you know, humans have been jerks to people for all sorts of reasons for a long time, you know. Okay, so racial quotas were eliminated in Bakke versus, was it Regents of the, or no, it was Regents versus Bakke. I don't know why the order is reversed. So 1978 Supreme Court eliminated racial quotas and admissions. Interestingly enough, they're back now. So Governor Newsom last year, at the end of last year, said that all corporate boards must have 30% come from underrepresented groups, which is LGBTQ and others, and you know, basically all these different, they specify all the different racial and ethnic groups that you have to pick your board of governors from. And so 1 out of 3 people your board of governors must come from an underrepresented group, and whether or not that'll stand up to a constitutional challenge remains to be seen. This is a very new development, right? So whole system of race seems stupid to me. Why do we have to put a label on them, right? You know, that whole categorization system is like, it bothers me. You know what I mean? Like, because it's literally a way of thinking about humanity invented by racists to justify white people being, you know, able to do horrible things to, you know, it's like, I don't know, like, you know, you have to acknowledge it because people talk about them in those terms, but at the same time, using the terms gives them life. And so, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not smart enough to solve it. I'm just going to tell you guys kind of what the different views on it are. Okay. Indians were considered Asians. Are you talking about Indians from India? Yeah, they're considered, yeah, they'd be considered Asians. And so, but Native Americans were the red color. So in that 5-color scheme of humanity that I showed you guys last time. There you go. There's the 5-color scheme. And of course, you can see that the white people have civilization behind them, right? They got a house in the suburbs. They got skyscrapers. They got palm trees. They got ocean, you know. So, yeah, back in the day, there was a bunch of scientists, and I use the term loosely, and they did things like phrenology, where they'd like measure the size of your skull and come up with all these like completely nonsensical ways of categorizing people based on, you know, their cranial structure and stuff like that. This is all nonsense, you know. And so the UN actually has a statement on the matter which says that all human beings are a single species, right? Race in biology means a genetically distinct subspecies, right? There is no genetically distinct subspecies of human, right? There are regional differences in genetics, for example, sickle cell anemia and things like that. But in terms of like a genetically distinct population, no, it doesn't exist. And so the whole notion of the 5 colors of humanity is just, it's all part of that early pseudoscientific nonsense, you know. And we still use the terms, and you know, so as long as people use the terms, you have to be, I guess, familiar with it and recognize that these terms do have an impact on a real life. But at the same time, I prefer, when possible, just to talk about skin color instead, you know. Okay, so there's 2 different terms. There's race and ethnicity. And so race involves grouping people into one of the 5 colors of humanity. And so, again, there's no real basis other than the fact people treat it as if it's real. And so it's a socially constructed phenomenon, and so you have to acknowledge that. But, you know. So why can't we be friends, man? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we all know that PC gaming is better than console gaming. I mean, it's just scientific fact, right? So, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, if you look at, like, you know, people will hate on each other for any reason, you know, like, what kind of music you listen to. Oh, I don't like those country music listeners, or, you know, I don't like people that play, you know, Xbox versus PlayStation. Like, what's the bloody difference? You know, there's a couple exclusives that are different, but, like, why would you care? You know, if you look at the days of late antiquity, if you look at the what we call the Byzantine Empire, which was the Eastern Roman Empire, you know, they had a civil war over which chariot team was better, right? Had nothing to do with racism, but there were the Greens and the Blues, and so it, you know, and they were political parties, but they were based on the chariot racing. So they'd go to the hippodrome, and they would have half the people in green and half the people in blue, and they would scream at each other, and it was like soccer hooliganism, and the chariots of the different teams would win, and they would riot, and it came to a head when they, like, locked the opposing political party into a room and massacred all of them. Like, you know, like humans have a fantastic ability to hate people on other teams, you know, and we talked about that before. It's a cognitive bias. When somebody's on your team, you tend to like them more and give them preferential treatment. When somebody's on the other team, we tend to be antagonistic towards them, you know. Like, when I was in high school, I played volleyball. Technically, there's only one race, the human race. Yeah, like that's what the UN says, right? Like, I played volleyball, and so our rivals. I played for Sarah High School, and our rivals were Point Loma, and man, like those games were dirty. Like they would stick their feet under the net, and if you land, like, you roll your ankle, right? You know, and stuff like that. Like, it was dirty volleyball. You know, you don't think volleyball can get dirty because you're on different sides, so you'd be wrong. You'd try spiking the ball in your face, you know, and stuff like that. And it was very antagonistic because we were the top two teams in our league. And then one day we're playing Point Loma. We're at their gym, you know, we're at their school. Hostile audience, you know, I think. I spike the ball, and the guy on the other side says, "Hey, man, that was a good spike." And I'm like, being sarcastic right now? He's like, "No, man, that was actually a really good spike." And it was a good spike. It was a good spike. I'm like, cool, thank you. And then as we're playing the game, like, all the guys and our guys are like, "Hey, man, good block." And they were complimenting us, and we were complimenting them, and I'm just like, what's happening here? Like, what the hell is happening here? Because everyone's being super nice and super polite to each other, and this is weird, man. Like, is this like a giant sarcastic thing? No. What had happened was, most of the guys on my volleyball team were stoners, and they went to a party, and they ran into the Point Loma guys there, and they smoked pot together, and they became best buddies. And I didn't know that, and I just, all I saw was that the mood suddenly had flipped from, like, antagonism to everyone just, like, hugging it out. At the end of the game, we're all shaking hands, slapping backs, you know. I'm like, huh? You know, and it's because they became part of my team's group, you know, and they started partying together and, you know, hanging out together, and I was like, oh man, these guys are really cool, you know, because my group had accepted them, and they had accepted us. Like, oh man, I like this guy, you know, the Seth guy, you know. And at the end of senior year, Seth and I split the MVP for volleyball in San Diego County, and I was happy with that, you know. And it was a weird thing, you know, how we went from hating to loving, and it was through the power of drugs. Apparently, I've never done drugs myself, but you know, it's like, all right, well, that was a positive outcome, I guess. You know, so Haikyuu, yeah, the Japanese anime on volleyball. Yeah. So weed is the answer to racism, I guess, man. Like I don't know. Like I said, I don't do drugs myself, and I mean Advil, right? But not, you know what I mean. But like I don't know. Like I don't know. It was mind blowing to me. So okay, so there's race and there's ethnicity. So ethnicity means country of origin, and so you can have white Hispanics and black Hispanics. The only ethnicity we typically measure on like job applications and things like that is people of Hispanic backgrounds, and that's odd also, right? Because it's like, you know, like in Canada, right? You know, you have people of English and French and First Peoples backgrounds, right? Those are the three main ethnicities groups, because First Peoples are obviously many different tribes. But like in America, it's like, yeah, Hispanic or non-Hispanic. That's it. Like, you know, did your people come from a country that came from Spain? You know, like that. You know, that's or not. You know, it's a very odd. It's a very odd system that we have in America, and yeah, but yeah, you can have white Hispanics, you have black Hispanics, you have Asian Hispanics, and because ethnicity refers to country of origin, right? Distant past country of origin, not necessarily where you came from or your parents came from, but like your family tree when you go back, and again that's kind of nonsensical because if you go back far enough, you have 2 to the n parents, you know, grandparents, great grandparents, right? It doubles in size, hopefully, unless you're really like if you're in the Habsburgs, like it's more of a straight line than a tree, you know. You know, in the study at AP Euro history would probably get the Habsburg joke. But like, you know, it's like my grandfather's a genealogist and he's traced my ancestry to like, I don't know how many different countries and things like that. And it's like the United Nations, you know, when you go far enough back, it's like I've got relatives all over the world, you know what I mean? So, do you know why that is, Hispanic background checking? It's, I mean, obviously, like in California, it makes sense, right? Because, but like in Maine, like I don't know, it's a strange, like in Maine where you have a large Canadian population, you'd think you'd ask that more, but you know, there's French Canadians and English Canadians and First Peoples. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't have any answers for you at that. Who came up with people of color? Yeah, so that's a good question. It's like the terminology, right, is always changing, and so in order to show that you are sensitive, you have to always stay up to date with the latest terminology, right? And so, like in the 1920s, colored people was the term, and that would be highly racist. Like if you like I was talking to this with one of my friends who's a black guy who lives in Japan. He's like, if somebody called me a colored person, I'd just be like, huh? You know, like, huh? You know, but like you can still see it in like the NAACP. It's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. We don't use those terms anymore. Instead of colored people, we use people of color. And then the more recent term than that is BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and People of Color, to highlight Black and Indigenous people so they don't get erased, because traditionally Native Americans tend to get ignored in these greater conversations about race and ethnicity and things like that. So, you know, it's just one of those things where the terminology is always evolving. People fight, like I said, over terminologies tooth and nail. Are you a prescriptionist, or you know, like all those things are. It's a giant thing. So, and then to make things more confusing, in the UK, race includes ethnicity, right? So, you'll hear people say, you know, anybody who confuses race and ethnicity is a racist. I'm like, it's the law in like some European countries, like that's the definition, you know. So, and how ethnicities have been placed into races changes over the years. Like it's giant mess. And I don't, like I said, I don't have any easy answers for you. I'm just telling you what, you know, I've seen. So, yeah, we like Latinx is like a thing now. So that's a whole thing that people are debating heavily right now. Have you guys heard the term Latinx before? So rather than using the term Latino or Latina, and also to be inclusive to trans people, the word Latinx is used a lot in conversations. And so Latinx, right? So rather than using a gendered term for Latina or Latino, they use Latinx. The trouble with it is, a lot of people haven't heard of it, but the trouble with it is that if you poll Hispanic people, do you like the term Latinx? 8-1 reject it, right? Because it's not actually a word that you can make in Spanish, right? And so it's like, all right, well, if the goal of being a sensitive person is to use terms that people of that ethnicity or race prefer, why the hell are you using a term that the people you're referring to of that term rejected at 8-1? You know what I mean? And so you'll see me not using it on here, not because I'm not sensitive, but because they polled people of Latin Hispanic descent, and the term of choice was Hispanic. So there you go. That's what I use, because it's like I'm not interested in you know what I mean? Like, it's like, cool, there's this new term, but if the people the term refer to reject it, I'm not going to use it. You know what I mean? So that's just me, you know. So, the X is supposed to replace the A and the O. That's right. Yeah. So, the good news is, racism can be a very depressing subject because, like I said last time, you know, if you especially if you look at the history of America in the 20s and 30s, under segregation, separate but equal, Jim Crow, grandfather clauses, there is plenty of racism to go around. But the good news is it's not all bad. And in fact, some of these issues are no longer even considered controversial. So in the 1940s, should white kids and black kids attend schools together? 40% support. Nowadays, they don't even ask. It's too high, right? And they stopped asking in the 90s, you know, because it's like there's no point. Interracial marriage approval, would you be fine basically with a couple of different races marrying? Very close to zero in 1960. You know, it's not that long ago. Like very close to 0% would be fine with a white and a black person marry each other, or white and Asian, or whatever. And there were laws against it in different states, and you had to do blood tests and all this other stuff. And the government would not allow you to get married in a lot of places. Now, what's interesting to me, and I mentioned this last time, is that you can actually see the American spirit at work here, right? So even though only 15% of people approved of interracial marriages in 1962, it looks like, 35%, only 35%, let's see, 35% said the government should not be involved in the decision. So you have like a 3-to-1 ratio of people saying this is my preference against it, but the government should not be involved in marriage. And that gap there between the two things is kind of the American attitude of my personal beliefs are not necessarily the same as what should be legal and illegal. And so this is very interesting to me, right? Because a lot of people want what they believe to be the law. And in America, we have this tendency of, all right, just have the government leave people alone. Get the government out of marriage, get the government out of sex, out of the bedroom entirely. If somebody wants to marry somebody, let them marry. You know what I mean? And so we don't even ask that question anymore because basically there's no support for laws against interracial marriage anymore. And personal approval of interracial marriage is now, you know, it's not controversial now anymore. So good news, over, you know, the span of 50 years, 60 years, basically these things went, like, I mean, look at that. That's like 5% of people who were fine with interracial marriage to like it not even being an issue. And so it's not all bad. It's not all depressing. Like, there's actually good news. And the trouble is, like, just getting data to support your ideas, right? Like, you know, people will make claims like racism is worse now than ever before. It's like, no, not always. There's definitely areas you can find. Like, there's all sorts of things you can find. But, if you look at history, and this is one of the reasons why I think that everybody should study history, is because, it gives you perspective on the current day, and it's not all doom and gloom. There are good things, yeah. So stereotypes. So whites being richer is actually not a stereotype, because if you look at the average income of white Americans and black Americans, it is higher. And the people who did the study acknowledge that. It's just to track attitudes about it, right? And so you can see that people are less comfortable saying that whites are richer than blacks now, right? Even though it's, if you look at the average income, it's true. But the stereotypes they're tracking are, why is there an income disparity, right? Why is there, what reason do you give for an income disparity between white people and black people? And this is, again, a white and black fallacy that we'll talk about in a little bit. But oftentimes the only two races considered are white and black, which bothers me, because there's more humanity than that, You're racing the other people. So anyway, so you can see that in the 90s, this is not long ago, right? This is not long ago. Almost 70% of people thought, it's the supremacy thing that I was talking about, right? And those attitudes have dropped significantly over time. However, they've also remained kind of steady.
Yeah, there's more than two races. There's Asian.
Thank you, Ada. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So they've fallen sharply, but they've also kind of, the fall has kind of, leveled off also, which is interesting, and that's something we should probably talk about, And this is very apropos to the events of the last year. Unfortunately, these polls ended in 2007. I don't know why there isn't a more recent one. It seems rather pressing these days with the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement and all the other people, Philando Castile, all those other people that have died. Maybe do the survey again. I don't know. I'm just saying. So if you look, what's interesting to me is you can see the difference in responses between African Americans and white people, right? Which is, white people at a 2-to-1 ratio over other situations say police are unfair to black people a lot more than like shops and restaurants and things like that. And if you look at how black people say how they get treated, it just shift all those things up, right? You know what I mean? And so that's one of the things I said. Like, all of my black friends have said they've been hassled by police, and I believe them, But if you're not black, then you don't see the same thing, because they're not hassling you, or at least they're not hassling you at the same rate. I've been hassled by police. I had a shotgun pulled on me because I was wearing green pants. That wasn't fun. I had to talk my way out of like not getting shot because they found a knife on me. What kind of knife? I'll show you. It's a Swiss Army knife that I had on my keychain. They patted me down. The cop who patted me down started screaming, he's got a knife, while this guy with a shaky shotgun held on me and I'm like, am I gonna die because of a can you imagine me like trying to stab hang on, I would be dead so fast, you know what I mean? Like, really? Is this how I'm going out, So they held it. Two cop cars came screaming up. One of them, two cops came out. One held a pistol on me. The other guy was holding a shotgun on me. The third one patted me down because I was wearing green pants. Apparently, a community service officer said that somebody in green pants was walking around a parking lot looking in car windows, not breaking in or anything, just looking in car windows. I just pulled in, and I'd gone down into the canyon because I just came back from a backpacking trip. I like backpacking. And at UC San Diego, the parking lot that I was at was on a canyon. And so I went in there just to like look at nature and stuff like that, because I'm a hippie like that, apparently. I come out and the cops are like, we got you, and they thought I was a car thief. And I was just like, I don't want to die because I was looking at plants, you know what I mean? Because I have green pants on. Like, this is ridiculous, And so, the guy with the shotgun's like, You just went backpacking, huh? I go backpacking too. Where'd you go backpacking? I'm like, I was in Anza Borrego park, state park. He's like, really? What plants are blooming right now? I was like, well, the Ocotillo was blooming. Yeah, that was about it. He's like, he puts the shotgun down. He's like, this guy's all right. Like, literally, like, I'm not making that up. That's literally what happened. I talked my way out of not dying. They probably wouldn't have killed me, but because the guy was a backpacker as well. And I'm just like, the hell, dude? Like, why is this? Like, looking in car windows isn't even illegal. You know? Plants save the day, yeah. Like, how is this like a reasonable response to somebody wearing green pants? You know what I mean? Like, he's got a knife. Really? Really? It's not even a knife under California law. It's the blade's too short. Come on.
Yeah, it's like prepare to die.
Right? I'd be so dead. I'd be so dead if I tried. Yeah, and so, you know, please do hassle people, but like I said, all of my black friends have stories about being hassled. And I believe them, just because I don't see the same thing that they do, even though I've been hassled, you know, I believe them. And so it's just interesting to look at this data. You can also see these things are relatively constant over time, right? There's actually a dip in 98, and then it's actually gone up since then, right? So it's not like it's getting better. This is 75% of all black people, right? That's a lot, you know? So, but what's interesting is the difference in perspective, right? Because if you don't see it yourself, you have a hard time believing, you know? He's got a knife as the knife is in the cop's hands. Right, yeah. I'm still mad about that. Still mad about that. Okay, so yeah, like my daughter just said, it's more than just black and white, right? And so the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 prohibited, more or less prohibited, not entirely, prohibited immigration from China. If you ever have the opportunity, go to Angel Island. Angel Island is in the San Francisco Bay, and they still have the immigration facilities there. So like when a boat would come in from China, the white people would get dropped off in San Francisco. The Chinese people would go to Angel Island, and you would have to prove your right to enter the country. If you were a minister, you were allowed. If you had relatives in America, you're allowed. And if you're a diplomat, you're allowed. And that's about it. And I've been there twice, actually. It's fascinating. You can see carved in the wood at the dormitory, Chinese poetry. And I took 5 semesters of Chinese, so I was able to read at least a little bit of it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And it's like Ellis Island, but a lot of people just don't know about Angel Island. It's the Ellis Island of the West. It's the gateway to the West. So ships would drop people off on Angel Island and go through customs and immigration there. And yeah, and that ended in 1952, right? Like, this is not ancient history, right? Like this, you know. The gentleman's agreement with Japan, which was that Japan would voluntarily start restricting immigration, which led to eventually a ban on immigration in the 1920s, which was one of the contributing factors to World War II, because the Japanese government was like, screw these guys, what? You know, like, you're gonna not allow us just because we're Japanese? Like, screw you, America, you know? Then you have Japanese internment and the Korematsu decision. So in World War II, a guy named General DeWitt decided that Japanese people were potential saboteurs, and after Pearl Harbor, convinced FDR to sign the Executive Order 9066, which is Execute Order 66, right, from Star Wars. 9066 was the order to detain Japanese people in Military District 1, which is the West, Oregon, California, things like that. And, you know, people lost their jobs and lost their businesses and lost their farms here in the Central Valley. Occasionally, and again, it's not all bad, occasionally their neighbors would take over the farm for them and gave it back when the internment was over. So it's, you know, I worked with the Fresno Historical Association for years. And so there were actually a number of heartwarming stories like that. And then there were also the non-heartwarming stories where the guy was like, I'm going to keep it. Sorry. But sometimes in those cases, there was community pressure from the other people in Selma or Orange Cove or whatever. Like, dude, come on. But sometimes, yeah, they just kept it. So the Japanese farmers would sign over the farm to somebody else for safekeeping. Sometimes they got it back. Sometimes they didn't. Korematsu was a Supreme Court decision saying, yeah, the United States has the right to arrest people based on their race, but only in times of grave crisis like in World War II. And this thing, my friend was telling me about it, was actually the basis, the justification for the Civil Rights Bill in the 1960s. Because there's no longer a war, therefore, by the Supreme Court's ruling, you can't discriminate against people based on their race and ethnicity. So, had a positive side. And Fred Korematsu, the guy who was in the lawsuit, was actually apparently a civil rights activist like his whole life. Kind of on the down low, but was like involved in it. And so Australia had a white Australia policy. It's not just America, by the way. If you think I'm just picking on America, I picked on Canada. Canada's treatment of the first people, not great. Australia's treatment of the indigenous people there, not great, to put it mildly. New Zealand, the Maori, and not great. There's a lot of
terrible places.
There's a lot of terrible things that humans have done over the years. I'm not just picking on America. Australia had literally what was called the White Australia policy. They're like, we want Australia to be white, so we're not going to allow Chinese people or Japanese people to come into our country. And that was their official policy.
Asian.
And they have, you can, if you click on it, you can see all the horrible propaganda ads they have, like these hordes of people with slit eyes, like trying to pour into Australia, and it was like, keep Australia white, And so, interesting fact, at the peace conference at the end of World War I, Japan, of all people, put in a resolution for the formation of the League of Nations, saying it is illegal to discriminate against people based on their race or ethnicity.
That's good.
That is good. And guess what country rejected it?
Japan.
No, they proposed it. What country? And so England, Britain, UK, who was hosting the event, ruled arbitrarily, we're not going to do a majority vote on it. It's got to be unanimous. What country do you think voted against the resolution
Australia.
for the
Australia.
primitive United Nations?
Australia.
Not the USA. Go USA. We're not number one here. Australia voted against it. And so Australia voted against it, and England, in solidarity with Australia, voted for racism. And so that actually led to Japan, again, being like, screw you guys. We're trying to be the good guys here and not, we're making racism illegal. And you're like, no, we're not. We're not going to allow any Japanese people into Australia. We're not going to allow any Japanese people into America. And that was one of the reasons why Japan, during the Showa period, World War I was the Taisho period. The Taisho period was a period of democracy and chaos, also in Japan.
Did America support Japan of not basing people on the race?
Yeah, America voted. Everyone voted for it. It was a majority vote, but because Britain was chairing that chair, they arbitrarily said it's got to be unanimous, and then voted against it. And so, that led to Japan becoming isolationist and being like, nope, we're not going to play nice with you guys anymore because you guys are jerks, And they didn't feel they were treated fairly at the Paris peace talks at the end of World War I. They participated on the Allies side, and the Allies didn't treat them very well. And so, not like Japan in World War II were the good guys. Oh, hell no. Hell no. Japan did some of the most horrific things in World War II. I'm not giving them a pass at all. Talk about racism. Look at Japan in World War II. Not good. But, there's consequences to decisions and things like that. So, yes, girl. Was that? Yeah, go for it. So, so my point here is that it's not just between white people and black people, and racism is more than that, right? Like, there's plenty of racism and other issues to go around. This thinking, though, cost me a grant. I worked with Calexico. I don't know if you guys know where Calexico is. It's right on the border. It's in Imperial County, southeast corner of California. One of the poorest areas in the country, actually. I worked with the migrant ed program there. Migrant ed are the people that work with migrant students, which have very serious and real pressing academic needs. It's like if you're moving from school to school, and the teachers don't teach topics in the same order, that is very, very challenging to deal with. And so I worked with migrant ed on a number of grants, and so we wrote a grant for Calexico to do all sorts of cool stuff and help the students there, and the grant required us to talk about underserved minorities. So we talked about migrant students, we talked about the English language learners. The school's 99% Hispanic, 86% low income. It was a very strong grant, and they rejected it because we did not talk about underserved minorities. And I was like, what? That's the entire point. Like, what? And I realized what they meant was we didn't talk about black students. Because in their mind, there's white people and there's black people. And that's it. And so because all we talked about were the needs of the English language learners and migrant students and things like that, we hadn't addressed the subject. We hadn't answered the question. 0 points out of 20. And that was enough to kick us out of that was the only points we lost on the whole grant. And I was just like, you gotta be kidding me, dude. Like, that, like, we hit a home run on that question. And but that a lot of people just think of race in those two colors, so to speak, So, all right, you got like a few minutes left. Technically, we're way over time anyway. It doesn't matter. My daughter had a doctor's appointment, so. Computer science and racism. So now that we've kind of established the definitions of racism, at least to a certain, or bounded it in somewhat. Because like I said, right wing and left wing and center wing people all have different terms they use to refer to racism. Let's talk about computer science and racism. So COMPAS, we talked about that last time. That is a sentencing guideline program that judges will use to determine should somebody get parole, should they go to jail, and if so, how long they should go to jail for. And what they found was that black defendants got false positives, classifying them as high risk more than twice as often as white people. And again, black and white fallacy, right? Because this paper only talked about white people and black people. I had to dig around, and I found there was a paper that showed that Hispanic people were also disproportionately mislabeled as higher risk. So it tracked them after release and showed that, the actual recidivism rate versus the predicted recidivism rate was not good. And so black defendants were half as likely as to be misclassified as low risk, right? So if you are misclassified as low risk, that means the program says you're not going to commit a crime, but then the person does commit a crime. And so white people were more often misclassified as low risk. Black people were more often classified as high risk. And so the company that made it, which is a statistician from I think University of Colorado, says we don't ask questions about race. Yeah, but if you ask questions that will kind of indirectly ask about race, then there you go. And so that would be disparate impact, right? This would be the third bullet point here, where you've got a system, and it seems to be fair. Like, and they'll defend themselves saying, look, it's just a computer program. It can't be racist. It's a computer program. It's just algorithms, right? But what's happening is you have a system that is sending people to jail. If a judge looks at it like they rejected a plea bargain. I'm sorry, this guy's high risk. I'm not going to accept the plea bargain, which almost never happens, right? So that's a disparate impact, and so that's racism under the third definition here, right? And I don't have any issue calling that racism if, in fact, the analysis is correct, which, again, I went through all the sources I could on it, and I'm not convinced their methodology is valid. But if it is, then the system is definitely racist, because it is sending, people based on the color of their skin to jail or not, and that's a big deal. We talked about facial recognition last time. Facial recognition systems work less well on black people. There's also the issue of blink detection, right? Which Asian people, a number of cameras, you would take a photo and say, are you blinking, right? the irony is that like Sony had a camera that did that, and Sony is a Japanese company, right? So, you know, did they, you know, I don't know. So, Seikenji. So Facebook's ad system allowed advertisers to target people based on race, gender, and ethnicity for housing, which is illegal. We talked about that last time. Trump's administration sued them. Algorithms are used to approve mortgages, student loans, choose if you get into a company past the screening process for resumes, to promote people. For example, teachers will get promoted based on algorithms. Targeted advertising at you. All of these things can have bias. And again, it's not like a lot of these cases, it's not like they're writing code that says, if black, you know, do discriminate. They're not writing that. What they're doing is, in the case of the facial recognition problem, their training sets were of white people, mostly. You know, and so they simply did not train their facial recognition algorithms on black faces. And so it was sort of this, you know, it wasn't like they intended to do it, but at the same time, they didn't think about it. You know, and that's kind of what I want from you guys, is just think about these things. That's all I'm asking, right? Like if you go out and you make a autonomous vehicle for Elon Musk, for Tesla, and you're writing the code to have it not run over pedestrians, test it on black people. Just saying, should be something to think about. You know what I mean? Right? Have it recognize Asians, and you know what I mean? Like, just think about it and just, you know, see if your code works. You know, that's all I'm asking for. You know, I'm not one of these people that like wants to cancel people or any of this stuff. It's just like, just try and think about it. You know, that's all I'm asking. You know, when you write software that has real world impacts, which most of it does, just see if your code is biased, you know, or accidentally biased. So not even casting blame on you. Just see if it has a disparate impact. Okay. And the good news is, like, when the researcher at MIT went to IBM, they actually like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we screwed up. And so they added to their training set people of different races, and then the accuracy went up. So, you know, it's not like it's all horrible either. It's like, you know, most companies these days are like, good point, we didn't think about that, we'll fix it. Yeah. So, a big issue nowadays is pre-crime, which is a term from the Minority Report, a movie that came out 18 years ago, starring Tom Cruise, in which the police are given these reports about where crime is going to occur, and they go there and they arrest people prior to them committing the crime. And you're like, haha, that's science fiction. Wrong. So, predictive policing is a big concept. And what they do is they have a computer spit out, hey, you should go to this liquor store on, you know, Fresno and Shaw, and hang out there because we're going to guess there's going to be a crime there today. You know? And so, or, you know, you should patrol this neighborhood. Or this person is likely to commit a crime. There's a lot of different things that predictive policing does, but they're all data-driven elements to try to intelligently focus your police resources, which sounds good, right? Two problems with it. First is they're rarely transparent. And so if you're a citizen, you have no idea why the cops are constantly hanging out in your driveway. You know what I mean? Like you're not a parolee or something, but you keep looking out the window and there's always cops in the parking lot of your apartment complex. Why? They won't tell you. That's a problem. Bigger problem is in the Tampa Bay area, in Pasco, I think the town is called, which is a bedroom community for Tampa Bay. They actively used the predictive policing program to harass people. Like, they literally called it harassment. Their goal was to, quote, make their lives miserable until they move or they sue us. Right? So if your name is on the top 5 list of potential offenders this month, then the police will come by to your house every day, knock on your door, maybe handcuff you, detain you for no reason in front of your neighbors. They'll give you a $100 ticket because your mailbox is not up to code. Oh, you got too much grass growing in your front lawn, $100 ticket. Your car's wheels are more than 12 inches away from the curb, $100 ticket. and they come back every day and ticket you again and again and again and harass you and make your life miserable. And a lot of the people on the top 5 list are like kids. You know, you think they're like gang members. No, it's like a kid. What did the kid do? He stole a bike. That's it. Misdemeanor crime, misdemeanor theft. He became one of the top 5 criminals in the county. And so they just kept coming to his house over and over again and harassing the kid. A 14-year-old kid or something like that, you know? And so they use, and if the police don't harass people, they get fired. So their boss will fire them if they don't harass people. So it was the job of the police to get a list of 100 people in Pasco and go knock on doors and see what they're up to and just try to be jerks to them. And then they say, oh, but we're not being bad. It's just the program. The program is unbiased. It's just telling us a list of names of people to harass. And here's the thing, though, is like when the computer decides who to harass, in part, it's based on history. And if you've been harassing these people in the past, then the computer will predict you should harass them in the future. Why? Because look at all these tickets these people have gotten. You know, right? Like, look, this guy's got 50 different tickets. He's definitely going to be in the top of the list. But he only got 50 tickets because the police were harassing him to begin with. You know, so it allows them to justify their harassment by saying it's just a computer. The computer is telling us computers can't be biased. They're all neutral. It's just a program. And so that's made nationwide news. And they're not, you know, they're not being like subtle about it. The good news is it's not racist, apparently. So the Tampa Bay Times did a racial analysis of it, and apparently they're harassing everyone equally, so that's good, I guess. I don't know. But it's like, what the hell, dude? What the hell, you know? That's not cool, you know? And in Chicago, LA, they both stopped their pre-crime divisions because they didn't work. They did, click on the link there if you want. They did this extensive analysis on it, and they found that it did more harm than good. You know, and in Pasco County, they said, "Hey, look, crime rate is dropping." And Tampa Bay Times says, "Yeah, it's dropping all across the area. You're not dropping any more than everyone else." And in fact, in Pasco, violent crimes are up. Maybe because you're out there harassing, you know, people for their mailboxes instead of, you know, going after, you know, serious crimes. I don't know. So, you know, all of this has to do with computer science and its impact on society. And I think Chicago's might have been racist. I don't remember the example on that one. But yeah, it's you know, it's called algorithmic bias, you know. And so even if your algorithm is fair and you don't program in things like race, then, you know, you can still get biased outcomes. So all I'm asking is just take a look at it. You know, that's all I'm asking. I'm not here to point fingers at people. Well, the Pasco guy, the chief of police there, sure, I'll point a finger at him and say, you know what, I do not approve of what you're doing. But by and large, you know, most of the time these things are just unintentional. And so all I'm saying is that when you guys go out into the real world, just think about it a little bit. That's it. That's all I'm asking. So, for example, one of my friends works at Fannie Mae. He's a PhD at Fannie Mae. And so every time they update their software to determine if they're going to buy a mortgage from somebody, they see if it has a disparate impact on different races and ethnicities. And if it does, then they kind of mess around with it until it's even. And by even, it doesn't have to be exact. Yeah, just kind of in the ballpark, you know. Okay. All right. Yeah, that looks good. Because it's been the law since the 60s to do that. And so, again, good news. Like, you know, like people will say that redlining still exists today. And maybe it does at the local level. But at the highest levels at Fannie Mae, which is the world's largest mortgage repurchaser as far as I know, you know, they look at this stuff, you know, and there is no algorithmic bias because they take a look, you know, every time. And it's kind of ridiculous to me as a computer science person that sometimes we'll just sit there and just randomly change numbers until it works. But, you know, yeah, you know, so that's it. So that is social impact of computer science and racism. So again, I know it's not like a fun topic like some of the stuff we've been talking about, but it's important. And just be aware that when you enter the real world, you're going to have real world impact. And so, just be thoughtful and just take a look. Just think about these things and do your best. And if you screw up, just fix it. It's not the end of the world. Okay. So that is that. Any comments, questions, concerns? All right. That is it. Thank you guys. And I will see you on Friday. Make sure you do Space Invaders. Peace.